excited to share another Wednesday night story time with you all. And if you watched last week, you know that this week we are continuing on with our story of Gumtree, Gulley. We're going to read chapter 2 today. And if you didn't watch the first chapter yet, you can always go back and watch that one before you watch this video. It's still up there so that you don't miss part of the story, okay? And these are pretty quick chapters. They're not super long, but this is technically a chapter book, so it has a few pictures in it, but not pictures on every page. So if you want to have something for you to do, to color or draw, that's fine, but snuggle up and get ready to listen to our story. And today, chapter 2 is called The Animals. Dead leaves could be heard crunching under the heavy boots of the ranger as he came over the rise and walked down the track into Gumtree Gulley. The ranger was a friendly-looking man, tall, bearded, and suntanned, but many of the animals who lived in the gully were frightened of him. As his shadow passed over the creek bank, Paddle the platypus dived into the underwater entrance to his hole in the side of the creek, leaving behind a slow-spreading ripple on the surface of the water. Jacko the kookaburra flew away with a flutter of feathery wings, landing on the top of a distant gum tree. Curly the koala seemed to sleep on undisturbed, yet he curled himself up into an even tighter ball in the fork of the tree where he slept, trying to look as small as possible so he wouldn't be noticed. Sneaky the goanna scuttled underneath an overhanging slab of rock, pulling his long tail in after him. Then he kept very still. Even wise old Wombat was a bit nervous about this tall, important person who was now striding through their gully. So he waddled back into the warm darkness of his wombat hole. Only the two youngest animals, Rocky the wallaby and Bluey the possum, were unsure of what to do. At first they thought they might hide behind one of the river red gums, but bits of them kept sticking out. "Pull in that long tail of yours," snapped Bluey to Rocky. "It's sticking way out into the track. The ranger will see it the minute he gets here." "Well, what about that bushy tail of yours?" complained Rocky. "Anyone with half an eye will be able to see that. Can't you tuck it up behind you out of sight?" "Oh, this isn't working," moaned Bluey. "We'd better find somewhere else to hide." Rocky the wallaby tried hopping up to the rocks of the overhanging cliff above the gully, but there wasn't a rock big enough to hide behind. At last he found a hollow tree stump that had been burnt out in a bushfire many years before. He squeezed himself into the hollow space, but once again his long tail kept hanging out behind him, giving away his hiding place. Bluey the possum climbed up the tallest tree he could find, nervously leaping from branch to branch as the ranger drew closer and closer. Finally, way up high, near the thinnest branch at the very top, he stopped, clung on, and kept very still. From his perch, Bluey saw the ranger walk into the clearing in the bush below. The ranger stood in the middle of the clearing, took off his wide-brimmed hat, and scratched his head. Then he gave a friendly laugh and said, "Come on out, all of you. I know you're all trying to hide, so you might as well come out." Just then, the thin branch Bluey was clinging to gave way under his weight, snapping with a crack and sending the possum tumbling down through the gum leaves. And here's a picture. There's Bluey falling out of his tree while the ranger is watching. Fortunately, Bluey grabbed a branch as he flew past. His sharp little claws dug into it and held him safe, while the leaves he had knocked off went fluttering to the ground. "Ah, there you are, Bluey," said the ranger, looking up. Sheepishly, Bluey crept down to the ground and stood at the ranger's feet. The ranger glanced over at the hollow tree stump and called out, "I think the owner of the long gray tail should come out of his hiding place." The tail flopped about for a moment or two, and then Rocky the wallaby appeared with a silly grin on his face. He joined Bluey in the clearing, sitting at the ranger's feet. Once again, Ranger looked up and called out, "Curly, I know you're pretending to be asleep. Come down here and join our group. And Jacko, you're not far enough away to be out of sight. You might as well join us too." Just then, wise old Wombat waddled out of his hole, muttering, "I know I was foolish to hide, so here I am." "Thank you, Wombat. Very wise," said the ranger. "Now, Sneaky, I can see the tip of your black and yellow tail, so you might as well give up your hiding place under that rock. And Paddle, you always hide in the same place, in your creek bank home. So you come on out and join us too." A few minutes later, all of the animals of Gumtree Gully had gathered in the clearing and were sitting around the ranger. He sat down on the stump of a long dead tree and said, "Now, you animals know that I gave you just one rule you must obey. Can any of you tell me what that rule was?" This one has a picture too. Here's the ranger with all the animals sitting around him. Each animal looked around at all the others until Wombat cleared his throat and said, I think the only rule you gave us was that we must clear away the dead leaves. You said we should rake up all the leaf litter into a clearing, a safe place well away from the bush." "And why did I tell you this?" asked the ranger. "Because," began Bluey, and then he stopped, feeling foolish. "Go on, Bluey," said the ranger in a kind voice. "Because," continued Bluey, "because leaf litter is a fire hazard." "That's right," said the ranger. "Leaf litter is a fire hazard. A bushfire could completely destroy Gumtree Gully. Worse than that, a bushfire could kill every animal here. That's true, isn't it?" The animals all nodded in agreement. "That's why I've told you that the one job you must do for me is to clear away the leaf litter. Rake up all the dead leaves into a pile in a clearing near the creek where they won't be a fire risk. I gave you this instruction for your own good." There was a long pause while the ranger looked around at the faces of the animals gathered about the clearing. "So then," he resumed, "why have none of you done this? As I was walking down the track today, I could see dead leaves everywhere. I could hear dead leaves crunching under my boots. There are dead leaves piled up thickly around many tree trunks. You haven't been following my orders, have you?" He spoke sternly. Each animal hung its little head and looked embarrassed. "I'm going again now," said the ranger. "I'm leaving the gully for you animals to look after. There is only one rule for you to obey. Clear up the leaf litter, get rid of the dead leaves, and keep the gully safe from fire. That is my only instruction. Will you obey it this time?" Every animal sheepishly nodded his head. With that, the ranger got up and left. As soon as he was gone, all the animals started talking. "Well," said Curly with a yawn, "the rest of you should get on with clearing up the leaf litter. I have some sleep to catch up on." "Are you going to help?" asked Bluey. "Help?" muttered Curly. "Yes, of course I'll help, but later, not now, later, after I've had a sleep." And he lumbered lazily back up into his tree. "Well, I'm not helping," hooted Jacko the kookaburra. "I think it's a bit of a joke. The idea that we animals should clear up the gully and keep it clean is hysterically funny. I could burst my sides laughing at the whole idea. So the rest of you can do it, if you like, while I sit on my branch and have a chuckle about it." Sneaky the goanna said, Well, I won't be clearing up any leaf litter. No one tells me what to do. Not even the ranger. I run my life my own way. Thank you very much. This little goanna doesn't take orders from anyone. But, stuttered Rocky, I saw you nod your head. You seemed to agree with the cleanup when the ranger was here. Well, I was lying then, wasn't I? Snapped Sneaky, and he hurried away to find a place in the sun. Rocky and Bluey turned to the two remaining animals, Paddle and Wombat, and asked them if they would help clean up the leaf litter. The purpose of life is pleasure, said Paddle as he waddled off towards the creek. I'm here to have fun, to swim and splash about. Doing the ranger's work would spoil my fun, so I'm out. Wombat said, I will most certainly help to clean up the dead leaves and all the leaf litter. I want to obey the ranger's instructions, and I want the gully to be safe from bushfire. But I have some important things to attend to in my wombat hole. I'm in the middle of painting the walls of the tunnels. As soon as I've done that, I'll be back out to help with the cleanup. In the meantime, you two young animals can make a start. As the brown furry bottom of Wombat disappeared down his burrow, Rocky and Bluey looked at each other. Rocky said, Let's make a start clearing up the leaf litter tomorrow. What do you say? Yes, said Bluey. Tomorrow. That's a good idea. With that, the two young friends ran off into the bush to play. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. Now, if you guys remember from last time, we said that this story was a story about animals, Australian animals, by the way, but it does have a meaning that's taken from the Bible that we can also think about. So, do you guys remember from last week who the ranger was supposed to represent? It's supposed to be God in our lives, right? So that was kind of like reminding us of the story of God in the garden with Adam and Eve. And so in this chapter of the story, in their different ways, all the animals said no to the ranger. They rejected his rule and the order he had given them to obey, an order that was for their own good. In the same way, we all say no to God. We reject him from being king over us. We try to be our own king instead. Even though God is the true king, we don't want him to be our king. We do what we want to do instead of what God wants us to do. We pretend that we are king instead of God. This causes lots of problems. But trying to do things our own way and ignoring God's rules, we hurt each other and make a big mess of God's good world, just like the animals who left a big mess in Gumtree Gulley and made it a dangerous place to live by leaving lots of leaves lying around. So in the Bible, in Romans 3:23, it says, all of us have sinned and fallen short of God's glory. And then in Romans 3:10, it says, no one is acceptable to God. That means nobody's perfect. Nobody does exactly what God says. No one understands or searches for God. They have all turned away. So, just like the animals did in this book, we sometimes rebel against God. That's just our natural tendency, right? So it's kind of like, how many of you guys have ever had your parents ask you to do something? Hey, can you help me put the dishes away? Can you take the trash out? Can you pick up your toys? And what's the first thought that comes into your head when they say that? Oh, I don't really want to do that, right? And so sometimes we have learned that we just need to go ahead and obey, right? But sometimes we say, oh, I really don't want to do that. No, I don't want to. And we argue, right? So that's what it means to rebel, to have someone tell you what you need to do and for you to say, no, I don't want to do that. That's what that word rebel means. So everybody at some point tries to rebel against God. And the Bible says that no one is perfect. No one completely understands God, and no one follows him perfectly all the time. Everyone at some point has turned away from God. Some people turn away just for a little bit, and some people turn away for their whole lives. So if we think about us, all of us people on this world, have we done a good job of running our world? Not that great. I mean, sometimes we might do good things, but is everything just going perfectly in our world? Definitely not. We can see that for sure, right? So we know that God has a better plan, that God knows a better way to run things. And so that's why God tells us to follow him. So we're going to keep following along with our story next week. We're going to read the next chapter and see what happens with the animals in Gumtree Gulley, okay? So as far as church, we are having in-person kids church for all kids next Sunday. That's the 17th and the 24th. So if you plan to be there, be sure and have your parents let me know. They can email, text, however they want to get a hold of me. And I will be so excited to see you guys then. Okay? All right. Love you guys. Bye.